etc. Plan B is all generic, some surgery and some Chinese medicines. Plan C, the cheapest, is all Chinese medicine. You know, acupuncture, herbal medicines, waving of hands. China actually has a system that has a very effective means of holding costs down, because patients can't afford to pay, and they simply will question, you know, do I need that? What is that for? And yes, what are the alternatives? Whereas in the US we never ask these questions, but in China it's very strong. We should not forget that there's a huge population of very wealthy in China who's willing to pay cash for everything. There are probably more millionaires than there are population of New York. Okay, these guys pay money, and in fact one of the interesting developments in China is that used to be $1,000 paid to the department chairman for collecting data was a big thing. Now they don't even glance at $1,000 US. But even more important, we find that many of our surgeons don't even operate in their own hospitals. So I asked why. Well, what happens is that because they're the top surgeons in China, they're always being asked to operate at a private hospital. So they get on an airplane, they fly to a hospital, they get paid $20,000 to provide the best surgery for some wealthy person, and they fly back. And many of the surgeons are making a ton of money, and the motivation for doing clinical trials is actually changing now. And I'll talk about the motivation later. And finally, we should remember there's no such thing as liability or malpractice insurance in China. In China, if you kill somebody or something, it's treated as a criminal homicide. It's not a civil matter. And so I asked the hospitals, what do you do about malpractice? They said, well, we keep a lot of money in a safe here. And when the families complain to the police, they pay the families until the families stop complaining. That was the malpractice insurance. There's some misconceptions. One of the misconceptions is that ethical standards are low. In fact, I don't think this is true. I don't think anything goes in China. And in fact, I think it's now becoming more difficult to get a cell transplant therapy approved in China than in the US. There's also the assumption that quality of care is low, and I agree that there's tremendous variability of quality of care, but there are some centers in China whose care is as good as in the United States. And even more interesting, many surgeons or doctors here in the US will be absolutely astounded by how well equipped the hospitals are. I would say almost every hospital in China now has multiple 3.0 Tesla machines. They're using diffusion tensor analysis routinely when they're doing all their scanning of the spinal cords. They have recently we held a consensus conference on what is the best way to transplant cells into the spinal cord. I asked the group, how many of you have CT guidance for cell transplantation? Every hand went up. They have taken the huge trade imbalance, and they've translated into equipment for their hospitals. And many of their top-of-the-line hospitals look like Hyatt Regencies. They're glass and steel towers. If you go to Shanghai or Beijing or whatever, this is what it looks like. It's really, it's a different world now, just in the last 10 years. And then finally, there's a lot of people who say that Chinese doctors are not as good. In my opinion, Chinese doctors, at least in surgery, are much more experienced than US doctors. And they have experienced everything. They've seen everything, and they typically operate on 10 times more cases than the average US surgeon. They have really almost very, very little complications from laminectomies. They have very few complications from cell transplantation. Okay, so I started this thing called China Spinal Cord Injury Network. Let me tell you very quickly the history behind that. It really began in 1998 when this young Chinese gymnast, Sun Lan, broke her neck in a gymnastic accident in the Goodwill Games. Her parents happened to be from Ningbo, which is where my father comes from. And her parents actually came to my lab before they even visited her in the hospital, and they asked what all parents asked, is there anything that could be done? I became very good friends with her, and in 1998, when she went back to China, we held a dinner for her at the New York Chinatown, and she was crying. And I asked her, why are you crying? And she said, how will the cure come from the U.S. to China? And I said the only way is to have clinical trials there. And I promised her that I would do my best to make sure clinical trials come to China. So in 1999, I went out there, and the first two professors that I met, I was really impressed with. And one was Professor Zhu Gong at the 4th Military Hospital in Xi'an. The other was Li Jianjun at the China Rehabilitation Research Center. And along with these people, we've now recruited the China SCI-Net centers, which I'll show you. We now have 25 centers. These have the top hospitals in China. I've already indicated to you that many of these are the top medical universities, the top military hospitals, but let me just point out at least 3 of the hospitals to you. One is under Beijing. There's a PLA 301 hospital.
It's a pointer. It's in the...
Actually, it's in the left hand.
It's okay. It's okay.
You're holding on to it. That thing's pointed.
Oh.
Okay.
Very top left.
Wonderful. So PLA 301, that's People Liberation's Army 301. This is the hospital that took care of Mao Zedong when he was dying. This is the hospital for the top political leaders of China. And it has this innocuous name, 301. But this is the best funded, top doctor hospital in all of China. They are one of our members. The Beijing Army General Hospital is, of course, the top army hospital. This is like the Walter Reed. Fudan University is the #1 medical school in China. It's in Shanghai. And the 4th Military Hospital is the top medical military university in China. Really incredible. By the way, China spent nearly $100 million on spinal cord injury research, and one of their major centers is in the 4th Military. Okay, fairly recently we included the Tzuchi Buddhist hospitals. This is just very briefly, this is the Tzuchi Foundation, Buddhist Foundation, is the largest catastrophic relief organization in the world. They run 4 hospitals in Taiwan. It's headed by a 72-year-old nun whose name is Master Cheng. And she, about 3 years ago, decided that she was going to invest in stem cell research. And when they decide to do something, they are serious. In my estimate, they've spent over $300 million US on stem cell research alone in their centers in Hualien, in Taipei, Taichung, and Tainan. She's never left Taiwan, never been on a boat, never been in an airplane. She's connected by internet. She's an incredibly smart, sophisticated nun who is worshipped by 5 million people worldwide, and I have been told that they each give $1 a day donation. So they're a serious player in stem cell research. They have a huge facility for cloning, and probably nobody's ever heard of them. And they are going to be, and they shun all publicity. So, and they are part of our network, and I can tell you that this is something that is happening in China that in the US we don't even, or in Taiwan that we don't even know about. Okay. So, all the money for the China SCI network actually have come from Hong Kong. We've raised all the money in a whole variety of things, including, the Barcelona soccer team played for us and things like that. A lot of things have gone on in China. We've raised the money. I made the decision very early on that we would not raise any of the money for China SCI Net in the US. It's all raised in Hong Kong. We're just now starting to raise money from China. And a few donors from the US have given in, but we have not actively tried to raise money for this. By the way, fundraising in Hong Kong is picking up. In China, there is no such thing as fundraising. So we're trying to change this. Okay, I'm going to keep going very quickly. We want to test combination therapies. We're standardizing outcome measures, and we're training investigators. In order to get these the Chinese investigators to work together. We actually hold these workshops and symposia with